Touting the sixth largest economy in the world measured by nominal GDP in 2022, the United Kingdom maintains its reputation as an international powerhouse. Britishers are proud of their country, culture, and history, or at least the parts of it they acknowledge. Conveniently, they forget whose back their country's bountiful wealth was built on. Britain has come down with a nasty case of colonial amnesia. Colonial amnesia occurs when former colonial powers ignore or even deny the colonial violence they facilitated and how it affects people. Britain had many colonies at its height in the 20th century, including its prized jewel, the Indian subcontinent. Even before the British retreat from India, Britain has actively ignored the damage it caused in India and actively erased Indian culture. Cultural erasure is the removal or whitewashing of minority cultures and perspectives, often through gentrification, appropriation, and the outright theft of Indian resources. Even if the British ignore colonialism today, clues to their colonial past still linger in many popular places around the country. Let's take a look at evidence of Britain's colonial amnesia at various British sites.
First, we have the Tower of London. The Tower of London is a 900-year-old castle in London that is known for housing the crown jewels and for once holding many famous prisoners. When it comes to the crown jewels, one of the most notable ones is the Kohinoor diamond. It was acquired by the British after the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1849 after pressuring Duleep Singh, the prince at the time. It's important to consider that Duleep was 10 at the time and they were coming out of a war, so there was a very large power dynamic between him and the British, and as a result, very unethical. As a result, many of the Indian artifacts in the Tower of London, as well as outside of it, is very questionable because of the unethical means it was obtained in. It also calls into question on how much India's wealth contributes to the British Empire, especially since the Kohinoor is the biggest, most iconic diamond on the Queen's crown. In addition to the Tower of London, we also have the British Museum. The British Museum particularly is well known for having various artifacts around the world acquired through unethical means. Of course, this includes India and Britain's previous colonies, but it also includes Greece and Egypt. There are a lot of discussions around having an encyclopedic museum. On one hand, everything is on one place, but on the other hand, it treats Britain as if it's the center of the world, therefore enforcing a colonial worldview. Additionally, there are many objects that are contested and that countries want back because they were essentially stolen from other civilizations. On top of the artifacts, the British Empire is well known for extracting and depleting the resources and wealth of their colonies. You can see this in a very tangible way when you walk into Parliament and everything is gilded in gold, to the point where you can't help but wonder where exactly all this gold is coming from. Now, unsurprisingly, a lot of this gold did come from India, and it goes to show just how much they funded the empire. There's also a statue of Queen Victoria in Parliament. Our tour guide briefly mentioned on how she was the Empress of India with no further elaboration. I also found a painting of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir when he was talking to a British diplomat, tucked away in a corner. And this really shows on how finding India in the UK is like a scavenger hunt due to people not talking about Britain's ties with India. The wealth of India is essentially seen but not heard or acknowledged.
St. Paul's Cathedral is one of England's most famous Anglican churches. It is also the site of many memorials for colonizers, painting them as heroes. In the crypt lies a memorial plaque to Robert Montgomery, a member of the Bengal Civil Service, praising him for wisely governing Punjab and restoring peace in Oudh after the taking of Lucknow. On the cathedral floor, there is a statue for General Cornwallis, governor of Bengal. From the Americas to India, Britain used him to subjugate its colonies. Cornwallis engaged in fighting the Tipu Sultan, ruler of Mysore, until defeating the Sultan in 1792 and forcing him to accept peace terms. The plaque applauds his unwearied zeal to promote honor for his country in the last moments of his life, when really he just died of a fever. Lastly, there is a statue of Thomas Middleton, first Protestant bishop of India, blessing 2 Indian children. These memorials make their subjects out to be larger-than-life figures and proponents for moral justice despite human rights violations. Furthermore, it suggests British superiority, claiming that British rule benefited India. Granted, these engravings are products of their time. Even in the modern day, there is no accurate historical context displayed next to the statues. William Morris was a popular British artisan who utilized Indian designs and techniques for creating fabric prints. One of Morris's first designs for his company, Morris & Co., was a trellis lattice, a feature taken from Mughal architecture. Morris's designs were heavily influenced by the styles of South Asia, but he never actually visited the region himself. He understood South Asia through interpreting objects, works, and writings of other white men, then would appropriate what he learned into his version of Indian textiles. Textiles created using Indian techniques are displayed all over his summer home, Kelmscott Manor. Many of the Indian items in the V&A come from the Great Exhibition of 1851, the first international exhibition of its kind. Although many of the items were purchased as opposed to pillaged directly, they are still products of empire. The museum features many British clothes produced using Indian fabric dyeing techniques, but it does not address the imbalanced terms of this cultural exchange. Britain used Indian resources to produce Indian-style fabrics in Britain, and it would sell these back to India, negatively affecting the Indian economy.
And finally, we have Brick Lane. Brick Lane is home to 400 years of immigrant history. It started with the French and Jewish immigrants who came to London to avoid religious persecution. Later, Bengali, specifically Sylheti, seafarers entered the area. Eventually, a Bengali community started forming in Brick Lane, and now the area is most well known for their curry houses. However, many of the curry houses are disappearing due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and gentrification. Many of the areas of historical significance we tried to tour were no longer there, or they were replaced by other establishments. These are areas where places that people can easily pass by without realizing its significance, as they blend in with most of the other buildings in the area. This calls into attention of whose narratives are being talked about and whose narratives are being preserved. The impact of gentrification is the process of colonial amnesia in real time, as well as the erasure of Indian history from the British narrative.
The British National Trust released a Colonialism and Historic Slavery report detailing the impact of empire in relation to famous British sites. This was negatively received by many Britishers who attacked the National Trust for threatening British identity. Some people suggest reparations, however, Britain could never afford to pay reparations and would never choose that route. After all, the main reason they snuck out of India was debt. More reasonably, Britain could acknowledge its crimes and educate its citizens on a less nationalist history. British colonialism must be included in school curriculums, focusing on minority perspectives and current-day impacts of colonialism.